So, thank you. Okay. So, anyway, hello. On behalf of Elephant Artist Relief Society, also known as EAR, and the EAR leadership team, I'd like to officially welcome you all to tonight's Umbrella Talk. My name is Jill Armstrong. I'm a longtime EAR board member and member of EAR's programming committee. For tonight's Umbrella Talk, we welcome Carrie McQueen and Brenda Hennig from the Alberta Foundation for the Arts to talk about grant writing for all the different arts disciplines, different grants for different disciplines. But first, I'd like to begin tonight's event in the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth by honoring and acknowledging Mohkinstsis and the Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, as well as the Ayasi, Nakota, and Tsuut'ina nations. EAR acknowledges that this territory is also cherished by the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. We celebrate all nations, Indigenous and non, who honor this land. We are grateful to engage in an honest and eager process of reconciliation. We are all treaty people. Tonight's event is part of EAR's ongoing series called Umbrella Talks, which offer presentations for artists of all disciplines. This year, EAR's Umbrella Talks are supported by the Rosa Foundation. And a little bit about EAR. Elephant Artist Relief Society is a registered charity that provides practical resources to artists of all disciplines in Calgary and surrounding areas to help sustain their well-being and livelihood. This year, EAR celebrates 17 years of service to the arts community. EAR provides emergency financial relief. Sorry, let me say that again. EAR provides emergency financial relief funding to artists who are experiencing a medical or financial crisis. Professional development workshops such as this one, twice monthly online artist meetup group on Facebook called Studio E, a wide variety of community resource information on Facebook and our website, and access to group health insurance benefits. As a charitable organization, we rely on grants, but also largely on donors, memberships, and fundraising to do much of what we do. You can help us by raising awareness about EAR, and if you can, consider becoming a member or donating online. 100% of every donation is allocated to providing emergency relief for artists in times of need. Another way you can support EAR is by purchasing a yearly EAR membership. Memberships support our administration and programming, like the event you're watching right now. So here's just a couple last bits of housekeeping. Throughout the presentation, we ask that you keep your mics on mute and your video off, so there's minimal background interference. Please feel free to use the chat function to write your questions as they come up, and we will answer them in the Q&A portion of the evening. There will be a brief 5-minute break after the core concepts presentation, and then another 5-minute break before I think we're just going to do one break. Sorry, just one break tonight before the Q&A. And when we get there, we will drop a link in the chat for a feedback form for you to fill out. And if you could please fill out the feedback form, it would be greatly appreciated. We base a lot of our programming on the feedback that we get back from artists in the community. During the Q&A portion, we'll address as many of your questions as we can until we end tonight at 9 p.m. So now, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Carrie McQueen and Brenda Hennig. But first, we'll start with Carrie McQueen.
Thanks so much, Jill. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I'm Carrie McQueen here with Brenda Hennig. from the Alberta Foundation for the Arts, and we're here to share information with all of you about our individual project grants. And we are coming to you from Amiskwaskawahigan, which is Edmonton, Alberta. And I'm also, before I came to the AFA, I'm originally from Calgary and had 20 years or so in the arts sector, a visual artist, media artist by training. And I worked with a lot of organizations in Southern Alberta and primarily Calgary, where I developed over the years a real passion for media arts in particular. And I've worked with all kinds of different disciplines, which led to me coming to AFA because part of my time I was also a contract grant writer for artists and organizations. So I developed a keen interest in really helping artists and organizations to help bridge some of those barriers and gaps and to get their funding. And I'd like to pass it along to you, Brenda.
Thanks, Carrie. Hi, everyone. My name is Brenda Hennig. I work with Carrie at the Alberta Foundation for the Arts. I've been there for 10 years, and I manage both individual and organization grants. Prior to coming to the AFA, my work experience was mainly in film and video production for broadcast, as a producer, writer, and director. I also spent a number of years with an academic press, working with the editorial committee and on the production side. So regardless of the disciplines that we specialize in, all of the consultants listed in the guidelines under the individual grants are experienced artists themselves or work in the community. And we try to keep up with what's involved in creating a project, what the components of it, and are available by phone and email to answer all of your questions. So on that note, I'm going to pass the puck back to Carrie and to start our presentation.
Thanks, Brenda. Okay, I'm just getting my share screen up here. Is my screen visible to everybody? Thank you. Okay, apologies. I suddenly have a magpie in the background there. Okay, to get us started, because this is multidisciplinary, just a reminder that these slides are a little bit higher level, so they may not cover every single question that you may have. So it's really valuable for you to pop those questions into that chat. Both Brenda and I will do what we can to address certain things as we go through the talk itself as well. And again, for those things that we can't, that's what the chat is. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's what we're here for, and we're really happy to answer them all. The famous saying goes, there is no stupid question ever, especially with grants. And I'm not going to be just reading the slide, and you don't have to madly be copying this down. We will provide this presentation to EAR to share with you after the talk, and I'll also forward an email with some links and things of value with that as well. So those will be coming so that you can enjoy the show. What is the AFA? We're actually part of the government of Alberta. We are an agency overseen by a board of directors, not too different in structure, in that way than say EAR as a nonprofit. We are actually responsible to the government of Alberta through the Ministry of Arts, Culture, Status and Women. And we provide all of the services as the government through to the AFA. As mentioned, we have many different kinds of grants for organizations and for individuals. And tonight we are focusing on individual grants. You can see on the screen that I've got kind of the list of what we do have to offer. There's kind of three main components to what we have. We have grants, we have scholarship awards, and we have one program that's a little different called the Arts Acquisition Program, which is a purchase program for visual arts. So that one itself is technically not a grant, it's a purchase program. Now the AFA grant supports a lot of different things, primarily all artists in all different, sorry, I'm getting a tangled tongue too. Individual artists in all disciplines who are Alberta residents. It's really important to note that you need to be an Alberta resident to get funds from the AFA with a minimum 1-year residency in Alberta prior to the deadline that you apply to. Our project request has recently increased to $18,000. For those of you who are familiar with AFA, it used to be 15. So a matter of weeks ago, really, it's now been increased a little more, which is fantastic. We also support projects. So we like to see things that have a clear start and end date. That's a project, not a continuous long ongoing thing, because we're looking for that target and focus. We also have many subcategories within our grants. So for example, we don't have a travel grant, but we do have, say, a music grant. And in music, you could apply for one of these 4 categories. And it's a similar structure across all of the different disciplines, like visual arts, same thing. You would see these 4 subcategories, same for dance, literary, and so on. It's important to know what the AFA does not support, because unfortunately we can't support all artists in all ways and in all manners of creation. We don't support non-Alberta residents. This is really important to know if you are somebody who is working with a principal artist that's out of province. So if your primary collaborator or principal is, say, based in Saskatchewan, your project may not be eligible if there's someone that has equal creative say and leadership on that project with you. If you're not sure about the role of a collaborative partnership, always reach out to us first so that we can make sure that you don't put all the work into applying to unfortunately find out that it's not eligible. Sometimes, though, you may be working with people where you're contracting them and you're bringing them in to do work for you. Usually that's okay because they're not principals. You still have artistic direction or leadership. And there's a lot of gray areas in there depending on your discipline, because what a principal artist is in theater can be very different from visual arts or music. Recreational training projects are not eligible. Example, at the City of Calgary Parks and Rec. Partial activities that are part of a broader thing, like study, are not eligible either. So if you have an MFA that you want to apply for, and you decide instead, I think I'm just going to apply for my thesis exhibit, that's only a component, so it's not eligible. The minimum you would apply for something like an MFA, for example, would be 1 full year, because what you're really doing is covering that tuition and kind of that umbrella of activity rather than a tiny bit of it. Excuse me. Applied arts, cultural industries, these are also not eligible at the AFA because the Alberta government has a cultural industry branch that may have funding that supports those areas, depending what your practice is. And you can see some examples on my screen there. And again, ongoing activities or activities that start before you apply are not eligible. And those are important to know too. And some interesting things about our grants in particular. AFA grants are not financing for entrepreneurial or commercial enterprise or for service provisions. So AFA is about supporting artistic development of the individual artists, or in the case of a collective or ensemble, of that group. If you're looking to start a business and get startup money, AFA is not going to be a fit. But that being said, we know that there's often a lot of kind of artists often straddle all those worlds between individual independent practice and a commercial practice or selling art. If you're a visual artist, having an outcome of selling art as an aside from a project, we're not going to penalize you for that. We're not going to punish you for success. And there's a lot of ways you can access funds. For example, maybe you want to create work to put it in a gallery, but an eligible application may be, I want to submit an application to do 12 months of studio work and produce a new body of work. That would be eligible. So just because you have a commercial arm to what you do, if you do, don't automatically mean that you're ineligible. Consider what type of project, reach out to us and we can help you sort through that eligibility. Excuse me. And it's really important to note, and this is a really common confusion for the AFA grants, is AFA grants are not intended to be salary placement or income support. The grants are intended to support your project. So you can kind of think of it like, we're not here to support you as an individual existing in the world. We're here to support the project that you as an individual will be working on. It is assessed by a panel of artists and peers. and it's intended to support creators in a variety of ways. And how we do that is AFA does not tell you what or how or where or when your project happens. As the artist, it's up to you to define your project because you are the expert on you and your practice and you know what you need. It's important also to note that grants are taxable income in Canada. AFA does not provide a T4A slip, so always keep your notification letter and check stub from any grant, whether or not they give you a T4. And AFA grants, this is also critical, everything's important to me tonight, are accessible to Alberta artists at all stages of their career. And this means that underage artists can apply. They will need a guardian or a parent who can be a signatory on their grant. And this is really common, especially for dance artists who begin training at very young ages. Some of the general FAQs about AFA. Can you apply for or have two grants at once? Unfortunately, the answer is no. If you've already submitted a grant, you can't submit another one. If you have a grant and you haven't submitted your final report to us, you can't apply again. The trigger for AFA is when you submit a report and we go and give it the stamp of approval, you can apply again. Kind of the connected question is, how many times can I apply in a year? We have two deadlines a year, March 1st and September 1st. You can apply to every single deadline if you didn't get the grant from before, or if your grant project from prior is finished and the report is approved. So we don't have a limit as to how many times you can apply. And that goes for a project. You can apply for a project multiple times if you don't get the grant. But if you do, we only support that particular project once. What if your project starts before deadline? This is really important because this works a little different for each funder. For the AFA, our deadline for submission is not the cutoff. It's basically this: you need to submit the grant the day before the project starts. So our next deadline, say, is September 3rd, because of the long weekend, and your project actually starts August 15th. You can still submit it for the September deadline as long as that grant goes in on the 14th. You submit September 14th, your project activity starts on the 15th. It's all technically eligible. Now, with this strategy, the thing to be aware of is we don't process it faster because you submitted it early. It waits in our system until that next deadline. Then we process it with everybody. So that's an option to know about. But the trick about that is you need to have money to pay for costs before you know if you've got the grant. So, there's a pro and con to a strategy like that. Can you submit extra material after deadline? Now, this may differ a little bit from individual grant program to program based on discipline. For the visual arts grant, and I might be wrong, Brenda, it might be the same across everybody. In general, the answer is no. Once that deadline hits, unless there's a faulty file that corrupts, we will then reach out to you for sure. Once it's submitted and the deadline closes, we don't accept new material. One exception is, say, you've applied for an MFA or to go to an artist residency and you didn't get confirmation of attendance until after the deadline. Those we will accept because you have no control over when those notifications come out. Project unknowns, we get a lot of questions about this, especially if it's a case of, I forget the analogy, but I don't know if I can do it till I get the grant, but how much detail do I have to have when I'm not sure about what I can do till I get the grant? This kind of like this catch-22 that happens. Always have a plan B. And it's okay if you don't know every absolutely thing coming up, especially if it's a research-based grant or some of them are contingent on getting money from us and maybe another supporter. This is where things like having a plan is good, timelines, kind of the basic things like this. If you can't say, I'm going to this program, blah, 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 you can say, these are the 2 or 3 programs I hope to get into, and I'm applying or I've applied. So if I don't get into my first choice, then I will go to my second choice. So in terms of grants, remember that grants aren't your art practice. They're the tool to help you get to where you need to go. So you need to think about this in that kind of, this is my grant tool. How can I make it work for me? Can you have a grant and be a principal artist in another AFA grant? And the unfortunate answer is no. And we do recognize that this is sometimes a really difficult thing for artists because we're often so very collaborative in how we work. So this links back to the very first point of, can I have two grants at once? Typically, when there's, say, a collaboration between two principal artists, they're equal creative leaders in their project. That means they're both getting money to fund that project. So that means both of those people cannot apply for a separate project of their own, because by the AFA criteria, technically they both have a grant. So first steps in the process. This may sound kind of obvious, but it's easy. As humans, I don't know about you, but I tend to skim read and I miss things at the bottom because I go fast. Read the guidelines before you reach out to us. Have a skim read. If you do have a language barrier, or reading is difficult, obviously, then do reach out to us first. But if you are okay, read the guidelines. Then when you reach out to us with questions, they can actually be questions that are really specific to what you need. So instead of reaching out to say, hey, when's the grant due? You're reaching out to say, this is my project. Is this eligible? Can you help me clarify? So make sure you're getting a lot of that bang for your buck for the questions, so that we can be sure we're helping you really in a timely fashion. You do need to have a user account with GATE. That's our online grant system. And we say on our website, I think at least 5 business days minimum, you should have it. I recommend highly you request it at least 2 weeks prior to a deadline, just because it gets busy. You can ask for an account anytime in the year. If you need one to start an application. We also have a user guide when you get an account with us and you're a first-time person. When our registrar sends your information to you, you get the user guide as well. Do have a peek at that before you even go in GATE. It's a good visual kind of way to get oriented about what GATE is. And again, you can always reach out to us for help once you've got that application started. Someone like Brenda or myself are happy to help you with GATE as well. We also, as I think Brenda mentioned, we can review your draft and provide technical feedback on your draft, your budget, anything like that. We're really happy to help that way, especially in terms of clarity, because, excuse me, we may not know your work very well. So we can help say, hey, could you tell me a little bit more about this? You start to talk about that there, but at the end, it doesn't really say very clearly what the outcome might be. So we can help give those kind of pointers from that really distant perspective. What we can't comment on is my project really good? Is it aesthetically really, does it have a high merit? Like, we can't comment on those kinds of things. And ideally, try to give yourself at least 2 weeks to write your grant. Sometimes we recognize you can't if an opportunity comes up quite quickly, but if you leave too little time, it creates a lot of added stress potentially for you, especially if it's your first time, because remember, you're doing 2 things. You're learning and thinking about how to write your grant. You're also doing the GATE system. So you're kind of doing 2 things at once. And I think this is my most fun slide that I kind of made up, and it isn't the official AFA slide. I think my favorite thing is when people reach out and they're like, hey, I want to get a grant. I always like to say, what is it that you want that grant for? What do you need? This is almost always what they say. They need money. And this is what I always used to say as well. I need money. And that's technically, it's a tool. That's not technically what you need down the road. It's a really important thing. And I don't dismiss how we need money, but money is a tool. What you need to ask yourself, what are my goals? What do I need this grant for? How is it going to help me reach that point, no matter what that is? And you will know what that is, again, because you define your project and your needs. Is it skill development? Is it knowledge sharing? Is it cultural learnings? Is it a new body of work? Is it research or marketing? Do you need to take a training opportunity or go back to school? And there's some components in our grants that, and if you've written grants before, some of you may be well aware of this too. We kind of have 3 primary grant components: our detailed project description, the budget, and support materials. So these are kind of the meat and potatoes of your grant to help to tell the story for that expert panel, so that they can really see what it is you want to do and understand how you're going to do it. The detailed project description is the narrative. I think about it this way. It's kind of like storytelling. Grant writing is not a thesis, so you don't need to come at it if you're an academic. It's not the same as a thesis. It's not an artist statement. A thesis and an artist statement can play a role in your grant. If you're an artist that, say, has a really academic background, include it, but break it out from the project description. Same with an artist statement. You don't have to exclude that because that may be a really critical part of how you contextualize your work. But again, break it out a little bit. The project description is essentially the 5 Ws: the who, what, when, where, why of what you're going to do. For the who, obviously your CV is going to speak a bit about that, or your bio. The what is about, what am I going to do? I'm going to need 1 year to create a new body of work in my studio. How are you going to do it? Well, here's a little bit of a timeline. I plan to do this over this time. Or for the first 3 months, I might do that. Then I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to look for exhibits. Who, what, when, where. Again, maybe you're going on a residency. I'm a musician going on a residency here in this city at this time. The why is really important because this speaks to, why is this important to you as an artist? How does it develop you in your career? How is this going to help you take that next step forward? And if you're an emerging artist, sometimes emerging artists feel like, I don't have a lot of experience. How can my grant have that merit, that high quality of merit? Sometimes that's even easier to explain as an emerging artist. Example, I was just out of my school. I got my BFA or M 2 years ago. This is my first artist residency for a month here in this country. That would be really great to tell a story about. Okay, here's where I am now in my career. When I go to that residency, I'm going to get this curatorial experience. I'll be able to see these cultural institutions. I'll be able to meet with these scientists or artists or other masters in their fields that can help me develop my ideas or my technical skills further. There's all kinds of ways. Apologies, my cats are playing and running around me, and I'm trying to pretend they're not there. Um, there's all kinds of ways that you can talk about the importance of this project for you. The budget, which Brenda will talk in more detail about, it tells the numbers story of your activities. So this should corroborate, and kind of highlight with those numbers. If you're going to travel, obviously your budget's going to focus a lot on travel, etc. I won't go into that more because I know Brenda will dive into that. Support materials provide evidence and insight. These could be things like examples of work, letters, quotes for things, example quotes for travel, flights, accommodations, confirmations of going to a program or a confirmation that you applied. Examples of your work is super important, I think, for any of the disciplines, depending what you're going to do. Make sure that if it's music, you have a good, clear recording. If it's visual arts or media arts, make sure that the file photos are clear and easy to see. If it's a video file, make sure that it's under 5 minutes. The panel's probably not going to have time when they're looking through well over 100, close to 200 applications to go through a 20-minute video file. And it may be different for film. That's for visual arts that I'm speaking. For Indigenous arts, I should mention before I forget, we do also accept oral applications. You can record or video yourself talking rather than writing about the project description. And if you're like a bit camera shy, people say this, I don't want to talk in front of a camera. I encourage you, point your camera if you're using one to a piece of art or something, and then talk in the background. Write yourself a script if you have to get going, or have a friend ask you questions. And if you're not sure, you can reach out to us and we'll be like, hey, let's help you walk through this process. Because writing is not always everybody's strength. Criteria, detailed project description. I think I kind of talked a lot about this already. On our website for each discipline, no matter which one, on the guidelines pages, when you scroll down to how will my application be assessed, these on the page here are basically the criteria that are going to come up. These are really important to talk about somehow or address in your application, because this is exactly the filters of sorts that our panel looks at when they look at applications. So we don't like throw them extra things under the hood that you don't know about. This, what you see here is what you get when that panel is at the table. So artistic, educational, or promotional merit and impact. It's okay if your project doesn't hit all those 3 targets. It doesn't have to. A promotional merit might be, say, making yourself a new website as an artist that you've never had one. Educational merit would be really obvious if you're applying to go for an MFA program. or say a month-long residency at the Banff Center. Artistic merit could say, you know, I'm going to create a new body of work, and then it is going to be released on CD or exhibited, or I'm going to have a new book published and I need time to write. For Indigenous projects as well, that also expands to include connection to and impact potentially on community. We want to see kind of an honesty in that project as well, in terms of, are you following proper protocol if you're working with Indigenous or cultural communities, especially if those are different from your own. Ability to complete the project, that's really kind of, if you're, this is where emerging artists, I think, struggle the most, where they fear that they're going to get kind of docked marks, so to speak. A CV can speak a lot to ability to do a project. Look, they want to make art over a year, and they're going to like shop it out to try to get exhibits. And you see they have an exhibition history of 10 years, and you see the caliber galleries, and you're pretty confident that that artist probably knows how to do that. If an emerging artist has less of that kind of real life experience under their belt, this is where you speak to it in your project description. It is the perfect place to say, I'm going to be making this work. I have these mentors I work with that are going to help me look for appropriate galleries and so forth. Or these are the things I'm researching and studying so that I can learn how to do A, B, and C. So it's really important, and I say this in case we have emerging artists here, that you don't undervalue what you bring to the table. I can't say that highly enough. Especially, you're just often at this fantastic point in your career where you're like, you just need that springboard. And this grant can help you get that springboard. Personal objectives and potential outcomes. This can be the hardest thing to write about because they haven't happened yet, especially if some of the details about what we want to do haven't quite gelled yet. It's really common, I see in a lot of the grants I've received, the part where people try to write about, these are my hoped for outcomes. They tend to talk about historical things that were great and really helpful. And you may want to address those if you think they're relevant, but put them higher up in your application, because that's telling a story of the past that leads you to where you are now in your practice. Remember, your outcomes don't have to say, I will do A, B, C, and D. Oh, you can say, I hope to do A, B, and C. These are my goals. And not having absolutes is okay in the many cases when you haven't got everything lined up yet. Because sometimes you're really waiting on funds, for example, or on notification of getting into a program. And the panel recognizes that, you know, projects, and then I've already mentioned at the bottom as well. Excuse me for just a moment. Some really useful elements to have in the written project description. I've mentioned the 5 W's, so I won't go through those again. And I think I've kind of gotten ahead of myself here too. Anyway, a timeline or a schedule is really useful for certain types of projects, especially if it's a longer period project. It helps the panel to have confidence in your ability to do the project, so you check that little criteria mark. For example, I'm going to do a new trip where I'm going to travel throughout central Alberta because I want to do plein air painting, sitting outside and painting the landscape. And if they've never done this before, they're going to say, here's my road itinerary. Here's the places I'm going to stay at that I've researched on the internet. Here's a couple of quotes I found at these websites. And that kind of basic legwork in the application gives the panel kind of the confidence that you're onto a good start and that you can continue with that project should you get your funds. If you need some resources, these are really valuable to include. So if you're going to have, say, mentors, training space, mention that you're going to be needing those. Especially if you're doing something that's a transition or new to your practice. Say you're a ceramicist who wants to do glass blowing and you've never done that before. You may want to have a mentor. I'm going to have this glass blowing artist mentorship or studio or residency. They're going to help me learn new skills in these ways. And speaking to support material, you might want to get an email confirming from that mentor saying, yep, I'm going to help this artist with this work. I think one of the most important things to say is there is no magic grant speak. I used to think there was totally magic grant speak because there's certain people who seem to do very well with grants in general. And I think it's not about speaking a certain language. For example, don't use academic speak if you're not good at it. Things can get muddy fast and you can lose a grant because the panel's not sure what you want to do. Speak and write in a language that's easy for you in your own kind of inner voice. That way you're going to struggle less with language and be able to be more clear on the page. Remember that the project description, it's not a CV, it's not an artist statement, it's not an academic thesis. It is the backbone of what I want to do, when I'm going to do it. Here's how I'm going to do it. Here's how I hope it turns out. And here's how I hope it helps me to advance my practice. And contingency plans, alternative plans are really, really valuable, especially if there's things you've applied for, you're waiting for answers on, or maybe it's a really big project and you have other grants out. I've applied to AFA and Calgary Arts Development. If I only get AFA, then I can scale my project down so that I can still do it. That's a good idea, a good example, sorry, of a contingency plan. So always think in contingencies, especially if some things are unknown in your project. And even if you get the grant from AFA, it's smart to have that built in so you don't have to come to us after and say, hey, I can't do what I said I do. I have to do this instead. Is that okay? Sometimes we might have to say no if it doesn't fall in scope of what the panel agreed to support. So if you're not sure your journey is a straight path, always have a plan B. And I think I will end it there and hand it over to Brenda. I'm going to stop sharing now, Brenda.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna
Thank you. I can see.
Okay, does everyone can see that? Great. Okay, so we're on the project budget. And you want to research market value for all the goods and services that you include in your budget. So you want to be thorough and make sure you're accurate with costs. Items and activities mentioned in your project description should have matching line items in the budget and vice versa. So in other words, the project description and the budget should support and complement each other. You want to show the panel that you've done your research and that you've presented costs that are as accurate as you've researched. Now, all of these expenses here are eligible. Artist fees, fees to yourself, fees to technicians, materials, supplies. If you've got travel involved with your project, the travel costs are covered along with accommodation and per diem. Any kind of protocol gifts, elder fees, tuition for your course can also be covered. If you've got a marketing project, those expenses can be covered. And of course, subsistence. If you need time to write and you need several months to do that, we allow up to $3,000 per month for rent or mortgage, food, transportation, child or dependent care. So those are all the eligible expenses. Now we have some ineligible expenses as well, and those include capital purchases. So those are items that go beyond the life of the project. For example, a computer or a new chair or a printer, a recorder. You can rent these items for the life of your project, but you can't purchase them. Production costs or publication, printing books, design, layout, those kind of production costs are ineligible. Any expenses incurred before your project start date would not be allowed. An example of a business-related expense might be, let's say, you hired someone to write your grant for you. Those grant writing expenses would not be covered. And also, again, technical production side of podcasting would not be allowed. The creation of the project would be. So here are just some questions. There's also, besides the expense portion of the application, there's a revenue page as well. And if possible, you can include a contribution, a personal contribution, a donation to offset your expenses. Not everyone can do this, and that's fine. That page can be left blank. But just to answer some of the areas here, the first one, if I'm applying for more than one grant, do I include both in my budget? This one's kind of tricky. Yes, if your project budget exceeds what the AFA can offer, and you do need to seek out another funder, you want to show that funder as pending or confirmed and communicate what portion of the project they're covering. If you are applying to another funder for the identical project, the exact same project, same costs, that's fine. We just ask if you are successful with a funder, you let the other funder know that you're successful and to ask that you withdraw your application. And if your expenses are more, and sorry, we didn't update the slide here, that should be 1,800. That's fine. You want to include on that revenue page a personal contribution, a donation, or some other funder to cover that balance. It's fine if the AFA is your only source of revenue. That's completely acceptable. Everyone's at a different stage and they have different needs. So if you can only draw on the AFA, that is completely fine. And if you anticipate money from sales or other sources, you can put that in the revenue as well and list that as pending or confirmed as the case may be. So Carrie went over support materials really well, but I'll just add a little bit more detail here. You want to look at the guidelines under each discipline to see what is required for your material. For instance, for video, we ask 5 minutes or under in a file size that can be easily downloaded. And on the guidelines, there's a separate email address that you can email us the link where we can download the material and save it in a folder for the panel. So every discipline is going to have a technical guidelines or a list of what they're looking for. So you want to go back to the guidelines for that. If your project is mainly for marketing support, you want to include a marketing plan. Reference letters are great as well, especially for emerging artists. If you feel you'd like a support letter, you're very welcome to upload that. Again, confirmation of enrollment if you're seeking support for training or career development. And when you look at the application, the online software for the attachment page, you'll see that there's about 13 different spaces where you can upload things. The top 2 or 3 are required. The rest are optional. Don't feel you have to fill everything and upload every space. Those spaces are just there for relevant materials to support your project. Okay, so moving on to the assessment process. So congratulations, you've submitted, you can put your feet up. And here's what happens when you hit submit. This is what we do on our end. So each consultant reviews the applications for eligibility before passing them on to the panel. And they create, they form a panel of 3 artists who are your peers in the industry. And their goal is to fund excellence. Their decisions are not based on gender, age, language, ethnicity, or geographic region of the province. We assemble panels that reflect the expertise required for each set of applications that we receive. The panel, after they have some time to review all the applications, they meet and they rank all those applications either as successful or unsuccessful. Successful applicants will receive a letter indicating the grant amount as well as the due date for a final report, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. Unsuccessful applicants will also be informed in writing. And unfortunately, we're not able to provide specific feedback on each application, but we do ask the expert panel to create some general comments reflecting some common themes or observations that they would like to draw attention to. And that whole process, because our board has to approve all the recommendations from the panel, that process takes about 3 to 4 months. So if you are successful, you will be required to submit a final report. And this also happens through our online software system or software. And as Carrie mentioned, you want to submit that report 60 days, no longer than 60 days after your project end date. And you want to wait to make sure it's approved before you've got the green light to put in another application for the next deadline. And the final report itself is very simple. It is not as long as the application. There's a survey. Your budget is repeated from your original application, and an extra actual column is added for you to put in the updated expenses. And then there's a place where you can upload your finished product, whether it's a link or the manuscript, whatever your finished project consists of. And the important thing about the final report, of course, is that it hasn't deviated from what the panel has approved. Every applicant is allowed a certain leeway as far as changes or adjustments that you might have to make to your project. And we ask that you contact the consultant just to check with them to make sure the scope of the changes is still faithful to the original project that you submitted and was approved. And the same with the grant money. We just want to make sure we're audited too. So we want to make sure that we've got everything we need for you for that final report that shows that the dollars were consistent with the original application and approach. Oh, okay. Well, that was fast. So I think I get to throw it over to you, Carrie. I'm just going to stop sharing.
Okay, I was going to say, unless you want to keep going, but there, can you see my screen? Oh, sorry, I think I forgot to. There we go. Thank you.
There we go.
Got it. Okay, thank you, Brenda. That was great. This is our summary wrapping up the formal part of our presentation. More about AFA. Here are some statistics, some numbers to give you a sense of the scope of what AFA brings in for our individual project grants. As you can see, 20 to 25% are successful. It is a competitive process. Unfortunately, we live in a world where we don't have money for everybody. That's all of our dream, I think. An unsuccessful project does not automatically mean it lacks merit or that your art is bad or that you're a terrible artist. It is disappointing to get that no when and if you get it. But usually it's linked more to common problems around was the budget clear? Was there clarity in the writing? Remember that your application is not you or your art. It's kind of like a third-party tool to your art. So sometimes things may get lost in translation. And that's all about our learning as artists. Remember, when you're doing grants, it's about learning that skill of grantsmanship, which is different than your artistic practice skill. And if unsuccessful, apply again. As Brenda mentioned, we can't give you personalized feedback from a prior deadline, but if you're applying with the project again, we can certainly give you feedback moving forward on the draft itself. This is an average of the number of applications we see every deadline, with the 2 deadlines per year that I mentioned, March 1st, September 1st. So multiply these by 2, and that's what you would see every year for us. And as you can see, music is the most highly subscribed program. Brenda, can I ask you, is literary higher than that now? In film and video?
Yeah, like I
Okay.
would put that, I mean, at the low end about 80, but we've gone past 140 lately.
Okay, good to know. Thanks. I just wanted to clarify for folks watching us. Um, I thought I didn't have those numbers right. So thank you. And the general summary about grants in general, not just AFA. As mentioned, always have a plan B, because when you apply for a grant, there is no guarantee you're going to get it. So have a plan B. Not all artists choose to do grants, actually, and that is okay. You are not less of an artist if you don't want to do it. I know some very established artists that chose never to go that route because they just didn't want to put the energy there, and that is equally valid as applying for artists. Um, we can also provide, I can tell them like, hey, we can help you. We can provide feedback and drafts, as I mentioned. And also a really important note, sit on a jury slash, in our case, we call them panels, if you can, and if you're interested. As part of the email links we send to EAR to share after, we'll have the link and information to put your name forward as a panelist. If you apply to be a panelist, it does not guarantee you automatically get to be one on the next deadline or two, but it does mean we add you to our list of names to be looking for. Um, and we always need new panelists from the community. Fresh names, fresh voices, fresh regions, always looking. And you don't have to have so many years under your belt. You can be an emerging artist right through to established. There's not really any rule about when is a good time to be a panelist. We will also provide these additional links as well. And links for us, Edmonton Arts Council, Calgary Arts Development, and also we will provide you contact information for all of our consultants for the programs, which you can see on the screen here. And I think that is the last slide on our presentation. And I also just wanted to close. Actually, I will let EAR close first, because we're done the formal part. Sorry, I was going to say EAR, if we have time later, as part of the Q&A, if you like, I do have an application form and gate I can bring up to show what gate looks like. But I will hand it over to you and say thank you, EAR. That's it for our formal presentation. Brenda, did I forget anything you would like to add before we formally hand it off to Jill?
No, I think that's good. I hope that wasn't too, sometimes we sort of dig deep in the details. So hopefully that wasn't too much for people, but again, all this information is very much on our guidelines and a grant writing tip sheet under helpful resources as well.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you, for that. I would like to say though, what you just said, Carrie, about that you have a gate, that an example of gate that we can look at. I think that would be very valuable, because especially if somebody has never seen it before, I mean, it can be intimidating, and I think it would put anybody at ease if they had a chance to look at it ahead of time with a little bit of guidance, for sure. Did you want to do that now, or? Okay, that would be great. And that'll
Sure.
probably generate more questions too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So this is what gate looks like. And I'm actually on a test system. This is not real gate. So for fun, I like to call it fake gate, but it looks identical to what you're going to see. So front office portal is what you would use as an applicant to apply to the AFA. So And this is why you need to reach out to us. Sorry, I can't do two things at once tonight. And this is what you're reaching out to us for, is for us to create this account for you in here. Let's see if I remember the password. Haha. So this is the landing page, and it's a pretty basic setup, actually. There's a lot of text up here, and the page that will quickly become your friend is when you scroll down. You're not going to have 1,000 boxes like I have here, because like I said, this is kind of a fake site. We use it for a lot of different purposes. You may have nothing in there until you do your first application. You may have 10 in there if you've applied 10 times. So this is actually an application form, and you can tell that it's an application form. I'm gonna try to zoom in because it's gonna be like small as a dust mote. And it's all squishy on my screen because I've zoomed in so much, but you can always tell at the top what is there. So some important things to know about GATE. It's a super old school system. A lot of the systems you probably worked in today do autosave, that wonderful magic where it just saves an entry. GATE doesn't do that. You have to save everything. So I start with that kind of like a joke because it's a little different than many things that all of you will work with online through web-based kind of applications. So when you start your application, the handy thing to know about for our particular thing are your navigation menus. These are your friends, because then you don't have to be going next page. And you can't break GATE. You can click on any button. Maybe you'll lose your way, but you can't break it. So it's a really nice, stable system to work in. And if you're someone who's shy with computers, you can't break it. Some of the important things like that we've mentioned, those 3 parts of the grant, these are just form things I'm not really going to go into. They're just like fields you enter. What's your name? When does your project start? Those are self-explanatory. Principal artist is good to know about. I mentioned those. Those are the key people in the project. If you're the only artist, then you're the principal artist. That's it. We also do have a bit of like a screening question so that it makes you stop and think, do I have one of my artists have a grant with the AFA? If they do, you might want to check in with us just to make sure that it's not going to be an eligibility thing, that they already have that grant, right? We have our budget form, which is mostly why I go into GATE. I'm going to zoom in really, oops, as close as I can get away with. GATE's got kind of an annoying format. Yeah, so this is the budget form, which is mostly what you're going to be interested in GATE, because this is where you will put most of your work in the forms itself. To give you a sense of what Brenda was describing, this is where your expenses would go. You know, you could have your description. These are made up expenses, by the way. I did not research any of the numbers; they're all made up. So you have the description field or box. You have number of units. That could be like 12 months at $500. Supplies, say you don't want to break it out into 10 brushes at 50 cents, 2 jars of paint at $10. If you don't want to break things out in incredible detail, you can go higher level in a budget and have supplies, 1 at 500. But if it's a large amount of money, it's probably good to still explain to the panel, what does supplies mean anyway? Because if your budget is too vague, they might not be confident that you know what you're doing. So for example, at the bottom of each section is a comments box. So you can choose to use that comments box. It's a great, great, valuable thing to give a bit of context about your numbers if you need it. So you can see here, I've also showed itemizing moose hides, 2 at 1,500 each. You'll see over to the right that GATE sort of automatically, it totals that for you. I mentioned save. This page especially you want to save. When in doubt with GATE in general, scroll down, because GATE tends to hide the buttons at the bottom. So really important, save. So when you're working in a lot of our forms, if you're entering information and nothing changes here, it probably means you have to save. The other nice thing that Gate does, I'll just show here. So you can see I've included this. Sorry, I'm jumping around a bit. There's expense types at the top. I tend to forget about that myself because I'm not a linear thinker, but it's important to know about because Gate has these little tiny stars, which you might miss if you're like me. If it's got a star, you have to fill it in. So you can choose any one of these. And if you're not sure what your category is, pick other. It's not critical. This form is kind of trying to serve many masters and types of projects. So you kind of have to play with it to get your project in there the best way you can. And Brenda also talked about the revenue page. Can I get closer? There we go. Non-AFA revenue. So in this section, you never write your AFA grant because Gate automatically calculates your grant amount here just below. And it does that by looking at, I got to go to the bottom. It does that by taking your total proposed expenses. You can see 21,650. And it does the math for us, thank goodness, because I'm really bad at math. Sorry, it takes that along with whatever your revenues are. You can see I've totally made some stuff up here so that the total is $15,000. If your grant amount is over what AFA allows, in case it's 18,000 now, this form does not do it because it's a fake Gate part. But in the real world, a red text will come up that says, error, your grant can only be $18,000 or something like that. And essentially what happens is Gate sees that error as an incomplete form and you can't submit it because it won't even let the submit button pop up. Another important thing to know about Gate in general is the submission summary page. There's a place called the profile where your personal information lives. It has a submission summary page. The application form like this also has a submission summary page. In Gateland, it always means it's kind of like a table of contents. So it's a brilliant place to go to see where am I in my grant? Did Gate accept that stuff? And you can see I've got a bunch of X's here. So Gate's telling me, no, that's not complete. You can't submit your grant yet. I need all the check marks. So that's a really valuable page because if you're not sure if it's saved properly, this can help you to check that out. So I think that's it. And then to go back after you're in an application, that home page I started with is the My Work page. And I won't go really into too much more detail because these are things that if you're not working in it in the next couple of days, you would forget anyway. But you can also reach out in advance. If you get stuck in Gate, we have the user guide. It's really great for reference. And if you still can't make heads or tails, reach out to us consultants and we can help you when you get stuck. And yeah, I think that's it. Oh, and the last advice that I think all of us have is the deadline date is always, whatever the date is, the time is always 11:59 p.m. We're really firm about that. So if you submit the grant and it gets to us at 12:04 the next morning, it's going to be marked late. So if possible at all, and sometimes we know it's just not possible because of life and schedules and stuff like that, try not to submit that grant any later than 15 minutes prior to deadline so that if you got a glitch with your network or something, you've got time to troubleshoot. I say don't do it 30 minutes prior. That should be your cutoff because the system is, it gets a little slow that last hour before deadline because we're not the only section in the government with a deadline on that night, especially September. Cultural Industries, I think, has a grant too. So there's a lot of users and Gate gets busy. I think that's it for now, or I'll just get into the weeds too much.
Mm. Okay, thank you so much for going over that, Carrie. It's very helpful. Okay, so we've got 6 minutes after 8, so we're going to have a lot of time for questions, which is fantastic because we do have quite a few already in the chat. So we could take a quick break. Now, Marianne has just put the feedback form into the chat. And like I mentioned in the intro, if you guys could please click on that link and go and fill out that feedback form, because your feedback is incredibly important to us. We understand more all the time about what the what the community needs. And it really helps us to decide on our programming. Like, we've actually started taking apart the grant writing program that we had, and we're reassembling in a different way to respond to need. So anyway, if you could do that, that would be great. So it's 7 minutes after 8. We'll come back at about 12 minutes after 8 and start taking your questions. So if you have any more questions, please do write them down in the chat. Okay. So thanks so much, you guys. we've got about 30 seconds before we're ready to get started. So make your way back and we'll see you soon. Okay, so we've got 12 minutes after 8 right now. And if you would like, if you feel comfortable, turn on your cameras so we can see you. And if you have further questions along the way, you could write them down or put up your hand. But the best thing to do would be to write them down in the chat. So we'll start with the first question is when you say AFA will only support projects once, do you mean specific phases of that one project? Thank you.
Do you want to get that, Brenda? Because you have
Sure.
phases more than any of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Some applications will include all the phases, all aspects of the project, and that's fine. Other people would like to split them up. So in video production, you might have a research, development, pre-production phase. You might just want to apply for that, or the production, or post. So you can divide things up as long as you've got a specific start date, an end date, and you submit before your start date. And for writers as well, you may finish a first draft, but you need to work on a second draft. You might need to engage some readers. You have a mentor that you would like to offer some payment or honorarium. That would be a phase that you could also put an application in, again, with a specific start and end date. So definitely phases are possible for an application.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Brenda. Next question. I appreciate the notes about A, the grants not being salary replacements, and B, the taxable income. Just some related questions. Let's say I'm the producer playwright for a theater project. I'm guessing I should still budget to pay myself for this work. Also, let's say I'm successful and get 18,000, but the majority of that money goes to project related expenses. I guess I would simply indicate these expenses along with the receipts, invoices on the tax paperwork.
Yeah, for that's more a CRA question than an AFA question, but it's still a good one. In the generic sense, I can answer it, but I am not an expert, just to be clear. Yes, you can write off expenses for a project. And if you don't already get an accountant or a tax preparer to help you do that, it's really worth the money if you're shy about the expense. As a theater artist, you may already be looking at these down the road. Sometimes smaller artists without larger projects may not. But yeah, definitely a lot can be written off. The general rule sort of is that whatever you pocket is taxable. But again, go to there's actually, we'll include in the page of links we send, the CRA has a web page actually focusing on artist project grants. And Canada Council has some good higher level information. So we'll include those too. Is there anything to add, Brenda, that you advise your artists? I imagine film folks run into that a lot too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I would direct you to the CRA as well, just to be sure, just to make sure you're doing everything right.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Next question is really good for any of the disciplines. It says, what is an acceptable amount for contingency in the budget? 5%, 10%, etc.
Ideally 10% would be great, but not all budgets can handle that. So, anything between 5 and 10, it just depends what you can handle.
And then when you're factoring that into the grant, do you actually label it as a contingency amount? Okay.
Yeah, you can put that down. In film video, sometimes you might want to just put that on production and post, not so much pre-production or research development, but it's up to you. Whatever your budget can afford, it's always good to have contingency, especially with a discipline like film video. You want to be aware that different things can happen, and those artists know that. So there's always some funds that you can just allocate as a separate line item as contingency.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Are there any supports, etc., available for persons with disabilities filling out grant forms or anything else? I guess meaning related to that.
At this time, the AFA unfortunately does not have any specific kind of support or program for that. It is part of a broader thing that we're looking into around EDIA, equity and access, etc. But that is, for me, like Brenda and me, we don't really spearhead that particular activity, so that because it's policy, so I can't really go into any more detail than that. Otherwise, if you do want to learn more, you can reach out to myself or Brenda, and we can hook you up with the person at AFA who can answer in more depth. But it is absolutely on our radar, is what I can say. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Just a comment from Marianne, reminding everybody that EAR will share the presentation slides and notes with everyone after the workshop. So don't worry about that. You will have access to everything, and that can really jar your memory about things that were talked about as well. Then there's some thank yous and thank you and thank you and many thank yous, and that was helpful. That's great. Okay. Hang on. Here we go. Is it okay? Where we go? Visual artist question. If applying to create a new body of work, what if you don't know which gallery or event the new work may be shown at? Does that have to be confirmed? Is it okay if it's a commercial gallery and not a public one? If commercial gallery is what you mentioned by pending sales in budget revenue.
As to your questions, it is okay if it's a commercial or a public gallery or an artist trend center. If you don't have an exhibit locked down, this is where it's really smart in your application to, in a timeline or a schedule or a paragraph, highlight these are the types of galleries, etc., that I will be approaching. That includes showing awareness that how you approach a commercial gallery may be different than needing to apply to a program committee deadline for a public gallery or an artist run. And even just a list of a few example names is helpful for the panel too. And it's, oh, sorry, before I forget, it's really common for artists in visual arts and new media to apply for research or art production, to have time in the studio, even without a show in place as well.
Okay, and it says, and adding to this question, she asks, does it need to be showcased at a gallery or can you have a community showcase? I'm not sure what that means.
I think I know what that means, and that's a great question. And I totally forgot about those kinds of things. Absolutely. As the artist, it's up to you to define and decide how you want to get your artwork out there. And a thing to consider is Brenda spoke about a project phase or a breakout in terms of film. If you have a large scale project in terms of it's going to take a long time, you may want to consider phasing it out. First phase is creation. Second phase is a marketing grant to put on your own exhibit in a venue. Because if you're going to, if assuming you have to pay to rent a venue and do all of this work yourself, or to do a community engagement event or something like that, if it's the kind of project that needs to be phased out, that's one option. Otherwise, it can all be lumped into one ask. So yeah, it doesn't have to be a formal gallery or artist run center. It can be in a coffee shop. If you have a community practice, it could be engaging with public on a downtown street. It's really up to you.
Okay, thank you. And the next question has already been answered in a couple different ways. It says, can you apply for just one phase in a project? And the answer is definitely yes. Okay. Although I would say that perhaps if somebody isn't sure about how to break that down, they could contact somebody at the AFA to get some clarity on that. Okay, cool. Do you have set maximums for meals and per diem?
Brenda, would you like to have a turn?
Yeah,
Or,
I know
or me?
that the government of Alberta has a list, sort of a generic list, and that is online. I just don't know exactly where that link is, but even if you Google that, there are some guidelines for that. Government of Canada I'm not sure, Carrie, does the Canada Council have a list that I can't remember if I saw that on theirs or
I
not.
can't remember. I wouldn't be surprised if they do, but I've seen the provincial and federal sites. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
And to answer the question, we don't have a maximum ourselves on that. It's only subsistence that we count. And that being said, be pragmatic in your travel related expenses.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. And then they add to it saying, and do you need to submit receipts for your rent, etc., if you do the latter?
Nope, nope. You want to always, for your own financial records, keep receipts at hand or in a folder for tax purposes, but you don't have to upload anything in the final report.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What kinds of defined projects could be applied for if writing a book?
Okay, so I'm thinking that means related to genres. On our website, we have a number of a list of eligible genres and topics, subject matter that are eligible for this grant. So fiction, nonfiction, memoir, essay, playwriting, that kind of thing. So there is a list on our website under the literary guidelines.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if they are also actually referring to the different phases for breaking it down into projects as for like the different drafts and whatnot.
Yeah, we don't list that out, but it's very much, first draft, second draft, polish. There's research development phase. Writers kind of are aware of how they're tackling their project and how they're dividing it up, and so it's depends on the practice of the artist too. Parameters are pretty open for that. The panel would consider a different styles from each artist and how they divide their work up.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Thank you for the time and great information. I want to know, Indigenous art is just for Indigenous, or when, as I'm painting, an artist eager to work on Indigenous life as a project, does it consist of that? I should apply for virtual art or Indigenous art?
I think maybe I know what you're thinking about. for the Indigenous Individual Project Grant. That's for people. It's not specific to a particular practice. So we get applications from artists, contemporary artists, who are Indigenous. We also get applications from those who are practicing traditional arts, cultural related arts, i.e. moose hide tanning, beading, painting, right up to people who are doing contemporary MFA practices, linking it back to their heritage. And some of the artists that are applying are contemporary artists that aren't even working with their heritage or identity as part of the content. So it's kind of everything. And again, that applicant decides who and how they apply with as an Indigenous artist. Is that helpful?
I hope so. It sounds helpful to me. Let's see. Let's see here. Anywhere along the way, if any of you want the answers to your questions clarified, you could add something to the chat, or perhaps raise your hand, or if you need clarification, please let us know. Or you could wait and contact Carrie or Brenda later on, after the talk. Okay. Oh, yes. And somebody is wondering, what does a membership to EAR cost? And Marianne answered that in the chat, but I will read what she wrote. It says membership to EAR is $25 per year, but if you're a student or unable to afford full amount, there is a lower cost option of $10 a year. Next question. For the emerging artist to apply for grants, does the artist have to graduate from a professional art school like Alberta University of the Arts? Thank you.
No, you don't. We have many artists applying who are still in their undergrad or their BFA. We've had high school students applying. Just jogged my memory. Brenda, I forgot about the scholarships.
Oh, right.
Thank you for
That's a
that
good
question.
lead-in. That's a
Yeah,
good
so that's a
lead-in.
good lead-in. I'll lead into that, and then Brenda, I'll let you follow it with the scholarships you manage. This brings up a great point. I always forget something every presentation, and it's never the same thing twice. You can apply for post-secondary study if you're interested. Say you're in your year one at AU Arts and you want to apply for year two. You could apply to the AFA to get support for that program. We also manage the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Scholarship for Visual Arts. Excuse me. And the Queen's Platinum Jubilee Scholarship for Performing Arts. And the deadlines for all our scholarships are March 1st every year. For the Queen's scholarships, I believe you have to be under 25 at the time of applying. And it's an award of $7,000. Because it's an award or a scholarship, you don't have a final report. You just get those funds and use them towards your studies. Brenda manages 2 scholarships as well. Can you tell us about those?
You bet. One of them is in writing. It's the Dr. McEwen Literary Arts Scholarship. It's listed on our guidelines, and the same criteria as Carrie mentioned, 25 years or younger, and that is worth $7,000 as well. And then there's also a film video arts scholarship, same criteria, $7,000 as well, both March 1 deadlines.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you. Carrie mentioned being a contract grant writer. Any idea where to find contract grant writers? As having a disability, Calgary Arts Development will fund this help for me. And then somebody did answer that question. They wrote, Step Up Consulting is who I recommend. So it sounds like there are places out there. I've never heard of that one, but okay. Anything else?
Oh, I don't know them either. That's great. There's somebody out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, maybe reach out. to any art service organizations like CARFAC, Alberta. That's for visual arts. The Writers Guild, if you're a writer, you may or may not have some contacts in the community. So art service organizations are very helpful. Also, I don't think Stage Left, or is it Stage Left in Calgary? They do a lot of work with disability culture and theater. So they may or may not have anybody they can recommend, but reaching out to them might be good too.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. Can you confirm that an oral or visual component of the application can be chosen regardless of the discipline of the type of funding needed? In other words, if I'm applying for a literary arts grant, can I still use voice or visuals in my application instead of a block of text, i.e. as another way of getting my point across?
Yeah, you bet. Any kind of, if you have a video or if you have maybe an MP3 file, as long as that's 5 minutes or under, is helpful. And you can email the address to the link to the consultant, or there's also the support material email addresses listed in the guidelines. So those options are definitely open.
Okay, thank you. Next one, I would be interested in seeing a list of your grant recipients and, if possible, a précis of their work, and even better, a look at some successful grant applications. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we can't share successful grant applications because of FOIP laws, the provincial laws. We can't share personal information. We also don't provide a thing that says, if you write like this, you'll get the grant, because it's a very dynamic process. There's different panelists every time, different applications on the table. So we've seen applications that aren't successful the first or even a second time that get supported and ranked very highly the third time. That's where us giving you feedback tips can be helpful. We do have some stuff on the website as well for writing tips and budget tips. Sorry, Jill, I forgot the first part of the question. Can you just remind me?
Sorry. They'd be interested in seeing a list of grant recipients and, if possible, a précis of their work and a look at some successful grant applications. Yeah.
And actually, we can share with you who has gotten grants from the AFA. There is an online resource that the Alberta government has, the historical grants recipient list, and it's anybody or any organization that's got a grant. It's a searchable database, so we'll put that link in the email that gets sent to you as well for you.
Okay. Next question here. Can elder gifts like tobacco be budgeted for? Usually an honorarium is not the total cost of consulting with elders. Tobacco gift is needed too.
Absolutely. Gifts for protocol in general are eligible as their honorarium. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, and somebody said, I think you skipped the first half of my question and answered the person before's question. It says, can you talk more about the difference between artist fees and subsistence for paying yourself for the project?
Yeah, I saw this question. I was going to circle back to it. So thank you for retyping that. So you can either go one or the other, but you don't want to include both in your budget. You either go for subsistence in those 4 areas that we mentioned that would cover your rent or mortgage, food, transportation, child or dependent care. So that's sort of a way that you cover some of your expenses as you're working on your project. The other route is you can have an artist fee for your role as a writer or a director, And again, you can, as long as you show and describe the units, if it's a longer project, per monthly fee, weekly, hourly, depending on what's involved. So you can choose either way, but we don't allow both areas to be in the budget.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How long do you have to complete your project after receiving funds? 12 months?
It's up to you. You identify your start and end dates. So whenever you complete it during the timeline that you identified, and then with that end date, you've got 60 days in which to submit your final report. So it's very much up to you. I mean, projects, I'm not sure about the other disciplines. You know, some of the longer ones may take up to 1.5 to 2 years, but rarely would we get anything past 2 years. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but it's just a bit of a guide.
Okay, thank you. Wait a minute. I think there's one more in here. No, it's just an agree. It's people just agreeing with the question. Okay. Okay, now Marianne threw in something here. There will be another event we're having called Nuts and Bolts of Grant Writing. That's a talk that's coming up later this month, and we'll cover a lot more of the how to write a grant, some more in-depth information on grant writing for any grant. So getting right down to the nitty-gritty of the process. Okay, another thank you. Okay. I missed a question here. There is a question here. I missed somebody's question about how money can be used for research or exploring. It was before the question about seeing examples. Okay. Let me see if I can scroll back and find that. Stephanie.
That was mine.
Okay.
It said, can you explain more about how this grant may be used for exploring a new body of work or that research type of application?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. And I'm sorry I skipped over it.
No
Okay.
problem.
So maybe I'll tackle that one, but I'll let you weigh in too, Carrie. So exploring a new body of work. Like if you mean even, let's say you're a writer, you need to explore a different genre, working in a different genre. Again, you can clearly identify that in your project description and then show what sort of activities and timelines, how you're going to do that, what sort of research, what kind of mentorship you need, that sort of thing. So it's falling within the research type of the application. But if you are going in a different direction or trying something new, it's like any other project. You want to provide the detail, explain how and what is involved and any costs, so the panel gets a clear sense of the work that you want to do. So I'm not sure how that works with visual arts. Carrie, I'll let you tackle that.
Okay. Thank you. That just your answer just jogged my memory. It is different in terms of how the grants take that on from discipline to discipline. For example, with visual arts, research can be the same as artistic production. So if your application straddles those categories in a visual arts and new media grant, it's a non-issue. Same for Indigenous arts grants. Research may not look at all like a Western model of research. That is okay too. One important thing, though, to point out for musicians, if we have any here, or those interested in a music grant, research is a very distinct activity within the grant. So for a music grant, you can only apply for art production or marketing or research, as an example. Visual arts, it doesn't matter if those components kind of merge together. So when you're considering about for your discipline, if you're not sure about, is this really research? Is it this? Is it that? Do check in with our guidelines and or reach out to us to make sure that you're making that appropriate category check if it's required, like it is for the music grant as well.
Okay, good. Thank you. That is, I believe that is the end of our questions. We have many thank yous in the chat. People were really enjoying this and finding it very informative. So thanks to both you, Carrie and Brenda. Does anybody have any more questions that they'd like to ask? We could give you a few minutes to write it down in the chat, or you can speak up and ask it out loud, or don't want to leave anybody out if you have anything. And like Carrie said at the beginning, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Okay, especially where it comes to writing grants. So if you have something, please do. Carrie just dropped the address for finding funding on the AFA site. So you might want to grab that so you know exactly where to go. That'll provide the guidelines for you for what qualifies for the grant and whatnot. And then, of course, within the next day or so, maybe a couple days, we'll be sending out the slides from the presentation, and you can look at them again. Okay, wait a minute. I've got a question here. She says, I don't really understand how you apply for subsistence while writing. Can heat, light, etc. be part of that?
We do in this grant discipline allow for utilities. I know that so it's, even though, think of it this way, I guess, with subsistence, when you write, even you're not getting artist fee or a wage or something like that, but you're getting your expenses covered, your basic subsistence, like housing and food, child dependent care, transportation, those basics. It may not be everything you need on a monthly basis, but it's a portion that contributes to covering your expenses while writing.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Is that? How do you for visual arts, Carrie, are those categories, you accept those categories as well, like the basic?
Yeah, just the basics, like rent. I'm sorry, I'm getting tired of losing my memory. Just the basics as well. But
Yeah.
Like Brenda said, I always tell my artists, subsistence really, it's intended to take away the middleman of asking for a salary or a wage from a project grant, because we ask for those monies to pay for the bills anyway, right? So subsistence is there to buy you time to write your project, to create your art, so that you're not hunting down contracts or doing other jobs. So really, that's why it's there. It's to support the project in that kind of way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And with that in mind, there is a question here: is vehicle payment included in subsistence?
No, car payments, house insurance, health insurance, that kind of thing, no.
Okay, that's important.
Yeah.
Taxes on your property, no.
Not
Oh, yeah,
included.
that's
Student
another good one.
loans, no.
Okay. That's very important. Is that detailed in the guidelines, that what does not qualify for
As
subsistence?
subsistence, yeah,
Yeah.
no, we haven't broken that out, but we're constantly looking at the guidelines and updating them, so we'll certainly consider offering more detail there. But
Okay.
it's very much those basic core costs, and those
Okay.
are listed out.
Great. Well, I'm glad that question came up then, because that added some clarity right here. That's awesome. Okay, wait a minute. There's a few more questions coming in. Here we go. Next question. I am planning on applying for this upcoming deadline. If I upload my grant this week, is there still time to get feedback?
Yes, I can, I will. Everyone, it's tough as we get closer to the deadline for sure, but we're a little ways out. We're about 3 weeks out. So, sure. I think, most consultants will be able to make time for that for sure.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. More thank yous. Okay, here we go. If a creation of a new body of work and the exhibition is in a different city, can you include the artist travel expenses too for our exhibition, or just the creation part?
You can absolutely include the travel costs for you to go to your exhibit opening, to install the work. And often artists will also go do some research while they're there. But if you do that, you do need to have a detailed itinerary to avoid looking like a holiday while you happen to be there.
Okay.
And in general, with our guidelines, when you're not sure if something is supported, a really great thing to scroll down, now I've lost it, is what does this grant support? And when you click on that, it shows you the yeses and nos for what we do support.
That's true. That's a good point. It shows you right there on the page in the website. Okay. Oh, now here's a question that I think could use a little clarification. It says, how can other disciplines benefit from this funding?
And which do you mean by other disciplines?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Like
I
which
think
ones?
they're basically um, I guess it depends on what discipline you are, and if your discipline falls under one of the categories that the AFA offers funding for. So I'm not sure exactly what that means. If that person would like to speak up or perhaps write a clarification here in the chat.
Yeah, she did,
Oh, there
in
we
the
go.
area of education, social work, rehab.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're kind of an arts org, right? We provide funding for arts projects and arts disciplines. So I'm, if it's a specific project involving social work or rehab, that probably wouldn't be eligible as an arts grant. I mean, you could say you're making documentary and that will aid in education for sure. So, but we're very much an arts organization that supports development and creation in the arts.
Yeah, and this actually comes up a lot in the visual arts area, i.e. Arts therapy as an example. And in general, we don't support that because art is being used as a therapeutic tool for social outcome or wellness outcomes. It is not art. It's not art. It's not how do you say, the artistic development of the individual, which is what our focus is on, and their artistic practice. So when art's being used as a tool for another kind of practice, it's often not eligible. I won't say always, because I think there's all kinds of possibilities out there. But yeah, if really your work is about rehab and wellness, that's not an artistic practice. That's where art becomes the tool, if that makes sense. And then
Could
you
we?
can call us and have a further conversation if there's more in that.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. I'm wondering, could we sum that up by saying that the grants are for are for fine arts as opposed to applied arts. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Let's see, a few more questions came in. Oh, Carrie made a comment here. Eligible subsistence as per website, basic living subsistence expenses include housing, local transportation, food, childcare, dependent care, up to $3,000 a month. Okay, so thank you for that. Let's see. So if the grant deadline is September 2024, is it good to have work begin after January 2025 to give enough runway to hear back?
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you can plot your project out that way, absolutely. Many applicants do that. Others submit and then they like to start in the fall, and they can kind of interim finance themselves and hope for the best decision. For the September deadline, we try to notify applicants by mid-December, with payment going out in January after the holiday break. So, yep, either way, whatever works for you financially.
Okay, that's a really good one. Okay. I think that might be it. I think if I've missed any questions, can you please speak up or say something here? I think I got everything. No, I think Marianne's given me a thumbs up. I guess I covered it all. Great. Well, actually that timing worked out just well. So we've got like about 7 minutes to thank everybody and say goodbye. But thank you so much, the two of you, and thank you to our sign language interpreters. It's been amazingly helpful, and I appreciated the broader view on the grants and really pushing home the idea that arts grants are not just for visual artists. We have to make sure that's clear. Obviously, the musicians, who are the bulk of your applicants, are not under that impression, but a lot of people are. They think, oh, arts grants are just for visual artists, and they're not. So thank you so much for that. And more thank yous. So many thank yous here. So I think you guys did a great job.
Thank you, Jill and Marianne, and everyone who attended. Really appreciate your interest, and our contact info is online in the chat box. You know where we are.
Awesome. Okay. Well,
Thank you.
take care, everybody, and have a good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Just shutting down things.
Okay.
Okay, just you and me. Good job.
Just you and me. Wow. Thanks so much, Marianne, for helping make all this happen.
No problem. No, you did really great. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. I was, you know,